I'm a 31-year-old man, and I've been married to my wife Kara for 3 years. We met on a dating app and decided to get married after a few years of dating on and off. Kara works in advertising, and I have a job as an executive in a big company. We have a mature relationship where we respect each other's personal space and aren't overly sentimental. Kara's job in advertising means her work hours are irregular and sometimes disorganized. I've always been understanding about it, but lately, I've been feeling like something is off. I tried talking to Kara about my concerns, but she brushed it off, saying I was overthinking things. Here's what happened. Last year, my nephew Julian, who is 25, finished studying cinematography and was looking for a job. He asked Kara if she could refer him to any agencies in the advertising industry. Even though her agency wasn't hiring cinematographers at the time, she tried to help him by connecting him with other agencies where her friends worked. But then, the hiring manager at Kara's agency saw Julian's work and offered him a job with better pay. When Kara found out, she advised Julian not to accept the offer. She said the work culture at her agency was toxic and not a great place to work. This surprised me because she had never mentioned any issues with her workplace before. I asked Kara why she didn't want Julian to join her agency, and she explained that it wasn't a good fit for camerapersons and cinematographers because of a toxic advertising director. I questioned why she had stayed there for so long if it was toxic, and she said she reports to a non-toxic creative head, but her friends had told her about the difficult advertising director. The next day, I called Julian and shared the same explanation Kara had given me. He said he hadn't made a decision yet and planned to do some research on the job offer. I didn't bring it up again and weeks went by. Then, a couple of months later, Kara came home looking angry. When I asked her why, she ignored me and went to take a shower. I thought she might be stressed from work, so I didn't dwell on it. After Kara's shower, she went straight to bed without eating dinner. I tried to comfort her and asked about her mood, but she said she was tired and just wanted to sleep. I understood that sleep was important after a long day at work, so I gave her space. The next morning, she seemed back to normal, and we didn't talk about what happened to avoid adding to her stress. That evening, Kara came home extremely angry. She didn't wait for me to ask, but immediately vented her frustration. It turned out she was furious because Julian had ignored her advice and joined her agency. She felt like no one in my family loved or respected her opinions. I was surprised by her reaction. I mean, it shouldn't have been a big deal if Julian made his own decision, right? He's an adult and can choose where he wants to work. Kara has always been a strong-willed woman, and I admire her for that. She succeeded in a career field mostly dominated by men. However, there are times when she can be stubborn. In the early stages of our relationship, it was challenging because she wouldn't change her mind easily. But over time, I learned to trust her instincts. Even if she couldn't explain her point logically, I knew she had a good sense of things. When Kara expressed her anger towards me, I didn't get angry in return. I knew it would only make things worse. Instead, I helped her calm down and reassured her that I believed in her judgment. But we couldn't force our decisions on our families. I explained that she had done her best to protect Julian from a risky move, but if he still chose that path, we should let him learn from it. I told her that eventually, she would have the upper hand in this situation. While I tried to comfort Kara, she remained silent, and I couldn't tell if she was convinced by my words. So, I decided to let the situation go and not dwell on it. It's been over 3 months now, but Kara's behavior has been strange. Sometimes she ignores me and acts distant, while other times she acts like her usual self. I've tried talking to her about it, but she dismisses it as being busy with work. She says I'm overthinking, and that everything is fine. I asked if she was still upset about Julian joining the agency, but she claims it doesn't matter to her. I know her comments can be harsh, but I believe it's just a temporary phase. She'll likely be okay eventually. I haven't spoken to Julian since he joined the agency, but I assume he's doing fine since he hasn't left the job. My main concern is how Kara is treating me. Sometimes I think her coldness is connected to Julian, ignoring her advice and feeling unappreciated. Other times I wonder if something else is bothering her. I'm not sure how to handle this situation. Update. Hello everyone, as I mentioned in the comments on my previous post, I decided to let things unfold on their own. I focused on my job, started going to the gym, and set a goal to lose 10 pounds. However, something unexpected happened. Last week was Julian's birthday. Usually I only remember Kara's birthday and our anniversary. I found out about Julian's birthday through social media and decided to give him a call to wish him. He sounded happy, but when I asked about his work, he grew quiet and suggested meeting up for lunch. It surprised me because a 25-year-old wouldn't usually want to have lunch with their uncle on their birthday, unless there was something important to discuss. I asked if everything was okay at his workplace, considering Kara's perspective on Julian's boss. I thought maybe Julian had realized that ignoring Kara's advice wasn't a good idea. So, I agreed to the meeting. I had to pretend to be sick to take a sudden day off, but I was curious to find out what Julian had to share. During our lunch, Julian seemed uneasy most of the time. I asked if something was bothering him, but he denied it. I even asked him about his boss and work stress, but he assured me that everything was fine. His strange behavior made me uneasy, so I decided to be direct and asked if there was something he wanted to talk about. He seemed surprised and admitted that he had something on his mind. He shared with me that he had noticed Kara being unusually close to her boss, the creative head. They often have lunch and coffee breaks together, and she leaves the office early with him, which has become a topic of gossip among their colleagues. Julian felt troubled by this because he's Kara's aunt and doesn't like hearing negative things about her. And he explained that people at the office avoid gossiping about Kara in front of him because they know he's my nephew. But rumors spread quickly, and he felt the need to tell me what he had observed. I asked Julian if he was certain about what he was saying. He seemed nervous and apologized for revealing all this. He was hesitant to provide details at first, but he opened up when I insisted. He mentioned that it's possible the situation is just a rumor, because they also have to accompany their boss to client meetings. It's conceivable that Kara could be leaving the office for legitimate work reasons. I felt overwhelmed and struggled to process the information. The problem was that Julian wasn't completely sure about it. There was a chance it was just speculation, unfounded gossip. And I had no evidence to confront Kara, which made my situation even more suffocating. When I got home, I felt disoriented. I spent the entire evening alone, barely touching my food at dinner. Kara asked if I was okay, but I couldn't bring myself to answer. I couldn't sleep either, feeling cold and distant under the blanket. And then, something came over me. I suddenly asked Kara, "Why didn't you want Julian to join your agency?" She seemed surprised and questioned why I was bringing up the topic again. I calmly told her that I had met Julian that day, and he seemed happy with his work and his boss. Kara rolled her eyes and put down her phone. After taking a deep breath, she said, "You know, my intentions weren't wrong. I'm not sure how he's getting along with his boss. Maybe it's because they share similar beliefs." I asked Kara what she meant by not wanting Julian to work at her agency. When I asked why she didn't meet me, she didn't think it was necessary to explain. After that, I didn't say anything. Looking back, I realized she had a point to some extent. Julian has criticized my sister in the past for her fashion choices and living independently. He even confronted a boy who was talking to her at school. So, I'm not sure if I can form a judgment here. While I trust Kara, I don't want to be blindsided or deceived. But I can't ignore Julian's instincts completely. I would really appreciate some solid advice. Thank you all. Update. I want to thank this community for the great advice I receive. Following their suggestions, I talked to Julian and asked him for evidence to support his claim. He was hesitant, afraid that our family might label him as a marriage breaker if he got involved. I assured him that even if his suspicions turned out to be false, I wouldn't blame him. If what he was saying was true, exposing a cheating relationship would be a big help. Eventually, he agreed to give it a try, although he couldn't promise definite results. A few days later, Kara came home from work and started getting angry at me. She accused me of using Julian to spy on her. According to her, Julian's actions had made her work life miserable, and she wasn't going to tolerate it. She even threatened Julian's job if he continued spying on her. I insisted that she explain her extreme reaction. She fired back, claiming that I shouldn't act naive when I was the one orchestrating these actions with Julian's help. Wait. It felt terrible to lie, but I assured her that I had no involvement in any of this. She revealed that Julian had been watching her closely, whether she was in the cafeteria or on the terrace for a smoke break. In that moment, I felt frustrated with Julian's misguided actions. What was he thinking by following her everywhere? Even if something was going on, it's unlikely she would engage in such activities in public spaces, right? At that point, I desperately hoped that Julian's suspicions would prove to be unfounded. I reassured Kara and promised her that I would talk to Julian to address the situation. My plan was to meet with Julian over the weekend and encourage him to focus on his career, instead of trying to expose Kara. But the next day, I got a surprising call from Mr. Stewart, Kara's father. He suggested that I intervene with Julian because he believed Julian was harassing Kara at work. I was speechless, wondering how Mr. Stewart found out about the situation. I asked if Kara had told him, and he explained that he was near her office and they had lunch together, where Kara shared her experience of Julian spying on her. I couldn't help but question if Kara might be exaggerating. I assured Mr. Stewart that I would handle it. Later, when Kara came home, I mentioned her father's call and suggested that we could have resolved the issue privately. I reminded her of my promise to talk to Julian, but she became defensive, saying it was her right to discuss her problems with her father. Let me tell you a bit about Mr. Stewart. He's an overly protective father who goes to extreme lengths to care for his daughter. He's the type who might reach for a gun if anyone even looks at his daughter. He takes great pride in being the father of an independent girl. I understand that being a father involves some protectiveness, but he takes it to the extreme. Anyway, in response, I immediately called Julian and arranged a meeting for the following week. The rest of the week was quiet. When the weekend came, I met up with Julian to discuss the situation, but he had a different plan in mind. I thanked him for his concern, but as I asked him to calm down, he interrupted me and said he had something to show me. He opened his laptop and showed me a video clip that made me feel uneasy. The video was long, but he quickly skipped to the relevant part. It showed Kara and her boss in an elevator. He was touching her hands while handling files, and then it escalated to him touching other parts of her body. I can't even describe it. There were not just one, but several clips showing her boss's inappropriate behavior in the elevator, secluded areas of the office, and staircases. I couldn't bear to watch all the clips with my eyes wide open. I asked Julian to transfer the files to me, and also asked how he managed to access the CCTV footage from the workplace, which employees are not supposed to have access to. He mentioned having friends in the engineering department who were able to hack into the CCTV cameras in the secluded parts of the office. When I got back home, Kara immediately asked if I had talked to Julian and made him see reason. I replied, "Yes, I told Julian not to get involved in your situation with your boss's advances." My voice unintentionally got louder, surprising her. She tried to play the victim, claiming that Julian had developed a hatred for her. I confronted her strongly, cutting off her dramatics, and told her I had solid evidence of her boss's inappropriate behavior. She didn't back down until I actually showed her the video clips. She seemed shocked for a moment, before returning to her self-centered attitude. She threatened Julian for invading her privacy, and warned that she would report the security department for leaking the CCTV footage. I couldn't understand her reasoning. She insisted that the evidence was fake, and urged me to verify it before tarnishing her reputation. I told her straightforwardly that I had undeniable proof of her visits to hotel rooms with her boss. I mentioned hiring a private investigator and claimed to have obtained all the information. This was a bluff on my part, as Julian had given me the name of the hotel where Kara and her boss often engaged in their inappropriate activities. However, I didn't have any further details. Despite this, I bluffed confidently and said that I knew all the specifics about their stays at the XYZ hotel. She fell for my bluff and was left speechless. She sat down and asked me to listen to her explanation before making any conclusions. I assured her that I was willing to hear her side of the story. She began, "You know I work in the advertising industry, right? It's just business. I have to keep my boss satisfied. There's nothing personal between us. It's just for work, you know." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. How easily she dismissed the personal aspect and labeled it as strictly professional. It struck me as hypocritical, considering she often spoke about women's empowerment in a male-dominated field. She wasn't standing tall with pride. She was bowing down with submission. I told her that her explanation didn't convince me, and that her cheating marked the end of our relationship. I intended to proceed with a divorce. With that, I went to her room, packed my things, and left the house. As I left, I told her that she should leave my residence as soon as possible, and our next meeting would be in a courtroom. She remained silent. I checked into a hotel for the night and caught a flight to Florida the next day. I'll be honest, I had a strong desire to escape from my unhappy life. That night, I reached out to a friend who is a lawyer and told him everything. He gathered all the information and promised to send the divorce papers to her parents' address within a week. Now, I'm eager to finalize the divorce as quickly as possible, even though I know it won't be easy. I'm not sure how I'll manage or if I'll be able to survive this difficult situation. Update. I want to thank everyone for their support. While I was still in Florida, my lawyer sent the divorce papers to Kara's parents' house. A few hours later, I received a call from Kara's father. He started yelling at me, accusing me and my nephew of being selfish and sexist. He believed that I wanted to divorce Kara because I was jealous of her successful career. His accusations confused me. After he finished, I asked if he really knew the truth because his assumptions were far from it. I told him that I had solid evidence to support my claims, which I shared with him during our call. I asked him to check his phone for the evidence. He went silent. The first part of the silence was probably when he watched the videos I sent him, and the second part was likely because he felt embarrassed. I apologized to him for having to see such videos involving his daughter, but I had no choice but to share them. I'm not trying to be a saint here. I can't stay silent and take all the blame when I'm the one who has been wronged. I'm the victim in this situation. That's all I heard from him. I returned after about a month, and by then, Kara had left the house. However, she was opposing the divorce and asking for alimony and a share of the house. My lawyer countered her alimony claim by highlighting the mental distress I had suffered because of her actions. He also assured me that our marriage was short and she hadn't contributed financially to buying the house, so she couldn't claim it. The legal case is still ongoing, but I feel like I've made some progress from where I was a few months ago, when all of this came to light. I'm not in a relationship with anyone, and I don't plan to be in one for a while. I'm focusing on overcoming my drinking habit, which I developed during my tough time in Florida. Thanks for tuning in, guys. So, here's what happened. I'm on a FaceTime call with my girlfriend, and she's supposed to be home alone. But while we're talking, I accidentally doze off and wake up to go to the bathroom. And that's when things get weird. I start hearing strange moaning sounds and swishing noises coming from her end of the call, like someone using mouthwash. I listen carefully for a few minutes to make sure I'm not mistaken. Then, I decide to ask her casually, "Hey, what are you up to?" I don't want to sound suspicious or anything. And guess what she says? She tells me she's just lying down. But what about those noises, right? So, I bring it up, and she denies doing anything. I'm left speechless for a moment, and then she mentions that she's not feeling well. That's strange because she never mentioned being sick before. Now, I'm starting to get really suspicious. So, I come up with a little white lie. I tell her I'm muting myself because I might snore, but the truth is I want to listen closely. And guess what? I hear those same noises again. It's like something out of a crazy Twitter story. I can't believe I might be getting cheated on while on the phone. Unbelievable, right? Now I'm wondering how to handle this situation. By the way, her place is about 17 minutes away from mine, if I take the toll road. I'm thinking about driving over there to see what's going on. I'll keep you all updated. Update. So I decided to drive over to her place while staying on the call with her muted. As soon as I arrive, the first thing I do is check if there are any unfamiliar cars around. Surprisingly, I don't see any. Now I'm starting to doubt myself. Am I just imagining things? Maybe she's really sick after all. I even consider going back home. But then, that gut feeling kicks in. You know that feeling, right? The one that tells you something's not right. So, I gather up my courage and knock on her door. But guess what? She doesn't answer. So, I hear some movement and muffled talking on the phone from inside her room. I knock on the door again, and this time her phone gets muted and our conversation pauses. Something is definitely not right here. Finally, she opens the door, and her expression is full of surprise. I casually say, "Hey, what's up? I just wanted to come by and see you," but her response is a bit strange. She says, "Oh, hey, what brought you here?" "I'm just hanging out." Awkwardness fills the air, and I can tell she is uncomfortable and doesn't want me to come in. I try to push my way inside, but she blocks me. We lock eyes for what feels like forever, and to break the silence, she tells me that she's not allowed to have anyone inside. This is weird because she snuck me into her house before, and even her mom was okay with it when she wasn't around. So, I tell her that something doesn't seem right, and I want her to let me in. As I start walking towards the door, she puts her hand on my chest and insists that I'm acting crazy and everything is fine. I don't like being manipulated, so I just say, okay, and I turn to leave. As I'm walking away, the FaceTime call suddenly ends. I check the door, and she's still standing there. At first, I don't think much of it, but then I notice that she doesn't have her phone in her hands. This means that someone else ended the call. Now, I'm starting to feel really anxious. I push her aside and head towards her room. I can hear her yelling my name, but I ignore it. Finally, I reach her room, and as soon as I open the door, a wave of uneasiness washes over me. I can hardly believe my eyes. It's like something out of a movie. There's a shirtless guy in her bed, covering his legs with a blanket, and he's looking right at me while I'm looking at him. And just when I think things can't get any crazier, I hear her footsteps behind me. She grabs me from behind and says, "Baby, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry, guys. But things are about to take a really intense turn." So, she's on the ground, crying her eyes out, and I can't help but feel this overwhelming anger. I've never wanted to hit a girl before, but in that moment, the urge is so strong. Meanwhile, I'm still locked in a stare down with the guy in her bed, and he's avoiding eye contact, clearly nervous. After what feels like forever, something inside me snaps, and the shock wears off. I turn my attention to her. She's a mess, sobbing on the floor, and I can't believe what I'm witnessing. It's like a scene straight out of a movie. In her bed, there's this shirtless guy, legs covered by a blanket, and he's staring right at me while I'm staring right back at him. And just when I think things can't get any more surreal, I hear her footsteps behind me. She grabs me from behind and says, "Baby, I'm so sorry. Now, let me be clear. I don't condone violence towards women, but in that moment I've never felt such a strong desire to give her a good slap." I keep my eyes locked with the guy, who's now sweating and looking incredibly anxious. After another 30 seconds, something clicks in my mind, and the shock fades away. I look at her again. She's still crying on the floor. Then, I shift my gaze back to him. He's a nervous wreck, staring at me with fear written all over his face. I gather up all the things I've ever given her that I can find in the room. With the most serious expression on my face, I walk out. She follows me, begging and telling me she loves me, but I'm feeling nothing. I keep my serious face as I make my way to my car and drive off. The entire journey back home, my phone is blowing up with her calls. As soon as I step inside my place, she's still calling nonstop. I had no choice but to block her number, otherwise, she'd probably still be calling me. I have no idea how I'm going to handle this situation, but the way things unfolded is really messed up. It's messed up for her, but I'm hurting too. Edit. I have made up my mind to never talk to her again. I finally found the closure I needed, and I won't let her have the satisfaction of getting her closure. So, here's the thing, guys. The guy involved in this whole mess actually came up to me and claimed that he had no idea she had a boyfriend. He thought she was just being friendly when she was talking to me. It's strange, though. It seems like the entire school knows about what she did, and a lot of people have distanced themselves from her because of it. I'm not saying it's a good thing, but it feels like karma has caught up with her. Now, let me give you some background. I was 30 years old, and happily married to my wife, who was also 30 at the time. We had been married for about 6 years. Let's call her Sarah, just to keep things anonymous. During those first 6 years, we did everything together. We traveled, ate meals together, and spent our evenings side by side. But in 2019, I started noticing some signs that, looking back, should have made me realize something was off. It all started when I had to go out of town for a work conference. It was the first time I had ever been away from home overnight without her. And guess what? She immediately suggested that her friend, let's call him Mark, come over and even stay with her during those days. Now, Here's the thing about Mark. They were really close. They texted each other all the time, and I knew for a fact that they had been involved romantically before I met Sarah. So I put my foot down and said no. I pointed out that he hadn't visited in the 6 years we had been together, except for that one time I was away. She got angry, but she seemed to respect my wishes, or so I thought based on what I saw on the security cameras. There were other things that made me hesitate, but let's skip ahead for now. Fast forward to the end of 2019. We're at the movies, and I noticed Sarah sending messages on her Apple Watch during the film. This was unusual for her, even though I can't remember the exact content of the messages. They just seemed a bit too intense for a mere coworker at her new job, even though they weren't explicitly romantic or sexual. After the movie I bring it up, and she brushes it off. But that's when her behavior starts changing. She sits away from me on the couch, goes to a different room to change clothes, and things like that. It starts making me wonder if she's cheating on me or hiding something from me. I feel guilty for even considering the idea of checking her phone for confirmation. I mean, what if I'm wrong? What if I ruin our marriage for no reason? But after days of thinking it over, I decide to check in January 2020. Her phone is usually nearby, but I don't know the passcode. Luckily, I can access her watch, and she had set the passcode to our anniversary, which is quite ironic. And what I discover next is absolutely horrifying. Sarah and Mark are actually discussing her encounters with a coworker, and they're making fun of me for not realizing what's happening. Can you believe it? I'm left feeling betrayed and hurt. It's a really tough situation, and I'm not sure how to handle it. Well, one thing's for sure, I've learned my lesson, and I won't let her have the satisfaction of getting her closure. I've made up my mind to never talk to her again. It's a painful decision, but sometimes it's necessary to protect ourselves. Okay guys, buckle up because things are about to get even more intense. So, after discovering those explicit messages between Sarah and her coworker, let's call him Carl, my world comes crashing down. Sarah starts talking about how the thought of me touching her disgusts her, and she can't even imagine having children with me. This hits me hard because we were actually trying for kids in mid-2019. It's a painful blow, but it doesn't end there. As I continue reading those messages, I uncover more and more hurtful details. Sarah used a trip she claimed was to support a friend as an excuse to meet up with Carl. She even started changing in the bathroom to hide the hickey marks on her body from me. Can you believe that? It's like a punch in the gut. And here's the kicker. Her therapist is aware of all this and believes I should know, but also thinks Sarah should be happy with whoever she chooses. Talk about a complicated situation. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stayed up until the early hours of the morning, reading those messages and taking pictures of everything as evidence. The anger and betrayal were eating me up inside. I clenched my jaw so hard that it caused issues for months. The next day, while Sarah heads off to work, I take action. I call a lawyer. I need to know my options, what I can legally say or not say when I confront her. When Sarah returns home, I gather the courage to have the talk. I share what I know without revealing that I had gone through her texts. I mentioned that I noticed a hickey, which is a lie, but she talked about it in the messages. I also let her know that I'm aware she's been texting someone. Sarah denies it, tries to argue that someone else gave her the hickey, but I eventually read a message from her watch. It's like a desperate attempt to find the truth, to make her confess everything. But instead of that, Sarah explodes in anger over me, invading her privacy. She tries to twist things and make me the bad guy. I'm left stunned, unable to comprehend how she can turn the tables like that. She storms out of the house, disappearing for 3 days without letting me know where she is, despite my concerns for her safety. When she finally returns, she tells me she wants to work things out and spend time together. I cautiously agree, hoping for some sort of resolution. But things quickly take a turn for the worse. I catch her sneaking off to meet Carl once more, and she foolishly leaves her watch behind, allowing me to read their messages in real time. It's like a never-ending nightmare. By February 2020, I've had enough. I inform Sarah that I've spoken to a lawyer, but she insists that she won't agree to anything until we go to couples counseling. Reluctantly, I agree to give it a try, hoping it might salvage what's left of our relationship. But let me tell you, it becomes a complete mess. When I try to explain that we're there because she had an affair, she argues about my choice of words, suggesting that affair is too strong. Can you believe the audacity? And here's the final blow. Later on, I discover that Sarah had cheated on me prior to Carl with a married man. How did I find out? By checking her watch again. It's like a never-ending cycle of lies and betrayal. So, there you have it, guys. My world turned upside down, and I'm left wondering how I ended up in this mess. It's a painful journey, and I'm still trying to figure out what to do next. But one thing's for sure, I won't let myself be treated this way anymore. I deserve better, and I won't settle for anything less. Alright, folks, here's the next chapter of this roller coaster ride. So, after everything that happened, Sarah finally admits her plan was to find an apartment and surprise me with divorce papers. Can you believe it? She was going to leave without me even knowing what was going on. And to make matters worse, she tries to shift the blame for the affair onto me, using minor disagreements as evidence of my supposed cold and uncaring behavior. Can you imagine? Apparently, not reacting angrily when my parents gave her a Christmas gift she didn't like, or when her parents playfully teased her, was evidence of me being a bad partner. At this point, it becomes crystal clear to me that I need to divorce her. She'll never tell the truth, and I can't continue living in this toxic situation. So, we come to an agreement that Sarah will leave our house, and I even help her find an apartment. I'm willing to do anything to speed up her departure. But then, in March 2020, the news about COVID hits, and all construction work halts, including the renovation of her almost ready apartment. Talk about bad timing. Now she has nowhere to go. From March to June 2020, I'm stuck in the house with her. It's like a never-ending nightmare. She knows enough about legal matters to realize that leaving could complicate her case and result in expenses for her. Those few months were incredibly difficult. Trying to manage my job and coexist in a house with someone who hurt me and mocked me was sometimes unbearable. We tried our best to keep things civil and avoid shouting at each other whenever we crossed paths. But imagine spending over 90 days preparing meals, passing by each other, and seeing no one else but the person who ended your marriage and shattered your heart. It was a lonely and isolating experience. Every day I pretty much isolated myself in a room for about 8 hours, finding solace in my work. Then, I would occupy my time with yard work or exercise to avoid interacting with her. She mostly moved out in late June when the world began to reopen slightly, and she had all her belongings out by July. She manipulated the situation to her advantage, making sure she wouldn't face public criticism. To this day, her family remains unaware of what led to the divorce. She didn't inform her parents until after the papers were signed. It was like she pressured me into pretending we were still together until that point. But I couldn't keep up the charade any longer. I told her she needed to let her parents know, or I would do it myself. Her parents never asked about the cause, although a couple of them wished me well. I didn't feel the need to tell them the reason because despite the pain and manipulation she caused, I didn't want to hurt them. They never did me wrong. Now, let's talk about Carl. Remember him? Well, surprise, his relationship with Sarah didn't last. When I found out, he urged her to leave me and be with him. But guess what? She tried to repair our relationship, and he ended things with her, leaving her with no one. Karma, right? These days, Sarah and I rarely communicate, except when it's absolutely necessary, which is infrequent. I've questioned myself at times, wondering if it was a mistake not to publicly expose her infidelity. But in the end, I decided not to. Despite all the pain and manipulation she caused, I didn't want to hurt her family. They didn't deserve to be dragged into this mess. So, there you have it, folks. The aftermath of a shattered marriage and the difficult choices I had to make. It's been a tough journey, but I'm slowly finding my way back to happiness. Stay tuned for the next chapter, where I'll share how I'm rebuilding my life and moving forward. Now, let's talk about the people who truly matter in my life. They are the ones who know the truth about what happened. I never bothered confronting Carl or Mark or even Sarah's friend, who knew about everything, but didn't warn me. It's just not worth my time and energy. Instead, I focused on myself and moving forward. And guess what? I found someone who is truly amazing, and we have a strong and healthy relationship. It's been a breath of fresh air after everything I went through. I haven't told Sarah about this new relationship because, honestly, it's none of her business. Just like I didn't tell her family about her cheating, I've decided not to rub my happiness in her face. It's not about taking pleasure in her misfortune. It's about being the bigger person and focusing on my own well-being. So, there you have it. The people who matter to me know the truth, and I've found happiness in my own way. Stay tuned for the next chapter, where I'll share more about my journey of healing and finding love again.